Hello everyone, my name is Himanshu Sharma. In this video, we will configure our microservice with circuit breaker functionality. To begin with, let's navigate to Spring Initializer. We'll create a Gradle project and let's name it Circuit Breaker Client. We will be adding two dependencies, Web and resilience4j circuit breaker. Java version 17, all good. Let's generate. Let's go to our downloads folder, extract it. We have our Gradle project. So you can import it in any of your favorite ID. I'm using IntelliJ. So I have project imported over here. Let's start and create a controller. We'll create a controller package. And inside this, create a class. We'll annotate it with REST controller. And now we will create a variable circuit breaker factory. And this is actually a bean we already getting from our dependencies. You just need to inject it. Now I will create a method which is destined to fail. So we name it fail method and we say method invoked over here. We'll create a string variable and try to perform some operation which will throw an exception. So over here we will be getting null pointer exception. All good so far. Let's create a handler which will handle our request. Public string test circuit breaker. We will make it as get mapping test circuit breaker. So over here, what we are going to do is we will use our circuit breaker factory to create a circuit breaker. So let's do that. Circuit breaker factory, create a circuit breaker and we name it as CB1. Okay. So you can see over here, it's a circuit breaker CB1. And now with CB1, we will use its run method. The first one, which will take two arguments. One is a supplier function and another is a fallback method which will be used for any kind of exception. So here we'll say return a message stating exception occurred. And in the first supplier one, we will invoke our fail method. So over here, I'm invoking the fail method, but you can use any service method as per your business requirement. And make it a return. I think we are missing a semicolon both of here, and then we will return it. Okay, so basically in this one, what we are doing is we created a method which will return a string and we will invoke fail method, and if fail method fails due to some kind of exception, then our fallback method, this one will be executed. So what will happen if anything fail, the return string will be exception occurred. Otherwise, whatever the string fail method is providing, that will be returned. Okay, let's clean this code a bit since we are just using a single line statement, so we don't need curly braces and not the semicolon. So, yep, that's good. This looks nice. Okay, that's all we need. Let's start our application. Okay, so application is started. Let's hit our endpoint and see what happens. Test CV. And here we go. We got the fallback message exception occurred. Okay, so now what happens over here? Let's go to the console. We got a method invoked. So what will happen is this method was invoked. We got this statement. Then an exception occurred. And since there's an exception in our supplier function call, we got the fallback message. Let's try one more time. We still getting the error. We still get the error. We still get the error. And over here, it's the same behavior. Method invoked, statements are logging, and then the method is failing. So now, question arises that this can be achieved by a simple try catch block. I can just put a try catch block and then handle the exception in the catch block and return accordingly. And to answer that, let me add some configuration and customize my circuit breaker and see what will happen. So I'm going to resources, my configuration file, application YAML, and here I will add some configuration for my CB1 instance. And the CB1 is the exact same string which we provided over here. And for CB1, you're saying this as 10, of course, as 3. Okay, so I add some configuration and let's restart and see what will happen. Okay, our application started. Let's go to terminal and let's open our controller. And now try to make some requests again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So if you see over here, I made 5 requests and I am getting exception occurred every time. And now let's see what happens at the console. We only get 3 logging statements from our method. See, that's the beauty of circuit breaker. What happens is, after reaching its failure threshold, it will stop calling this method altogether. So if you put try catch block, in the try catch block, every time, irrespective of the number of calls, you are hitting the try method, executing all the instructions in the try method until you get any exception, and then you perform your error handling. But here, after reaching the certain threshold, circuit breaker altogether stop calling that method and instead directly showing the fallback message. I hope you got the idea of the circuit breaker. Now let's go on to the configuration and see what we actually did over here, which resulted into this behavior. So we configured a sliding window size parameter as 10. So 10 is the number of requests which will be evaluated for any kind of failure percentage like this one or other configuration. Now coming on to the failure percentage, this is the failure rate threshold, and when we say 50, that means a 50%. So if we define it as 10, it will be considered as 10%. So this is the minimum percentage we are saying that once this percentage reaches for the failure rate, then the circuit breaker will open and directly invoke the fallback method instead of calling the actual method. And the last parameter, minimum number of calls 3, it signifies that number of initial calls which circuit breaker will allow irrespective of their status, whether all the 3 calls are failed or passed, circuit breaker will always invoke the actual method. So even though my first 3 calls were failed earlier, all the 3 requests were invoking method invoke logging. Let's change it to 5 and see what will happen. Let's restart. Our application is started. Let's go to terminal. Let's clear the logs. And now let's hit our endpoint. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now, if you see over here, earlier we were only getting 3 and then the method invocation stopped. And over here, you can see that now I can make 5 calls. And the only parameter change I made is the minimum number of calls. So for these calls, the first 5 calls, circuit breaker will not consider them for failure rate threshold. After this, any call I make, let's say I make another call, 6, I won't get that method invoked. And the reason for that is now that call is being considered as part of the sliding window size. And now that's the first call and it fails. So currently the failure rate is 100%. That's all in this video. Please provide your suggestions or feedback in the comment section. Thank you everyone. Have a nice day.